Hello, my fellow foam flinging enthusiasts. It is I, Andrew, aka Dart Sweep, and welcome back to another very fun-filled foam flinging episode of the Foam Zone. I promise one day we'll get a soundbox and we'll make it happen. So again, thank you for joining us on this evening's episode, live streaming show of the Foam Zone. If this is your first time joining us, the Foam Zone is a live streaming bi-weekly show that appears on the World Foam Alliance YouTube channel exclusively every other Wednesday at 8 p.m., where we have guests all throughout the hobby, whether you're an club admin, you play HVZ Club, you're an event organizer, designer, modder, or just a player. Anyone that is in the hobby is always welcome to be a guest here on the Foam Zone, where we just want to share our passion for foam flinging and just talk shop for about an hour. So if that is something you're interested in doing and being a guest, please contact us, send us a DM, and we would love to have you on the show at some point. So if you guys have not done so already, please give us a thumbs up, give us a like, subscribe if you haven't done so already. Please tell your friends and family. The website is currently under construction, which is a fantastic thing. That means things are in the works and are being worked on and improved. So I'm super excited. Stay tuned for that. At some point, you guys will be able to log in again and register yourself, your club, and be able to connect to each other, find places where to play, get together, have mod parties, and really just be able to network and have an opportunity to have a easier, more streamlined way of networking and communicating with each other. That is the ultimate goal of the World Foam Alliance, and it's going to happen one of these days. I think we have some merch that's going up, so if you want a shirt or a pin or some stuff like that, you'll be able to get that there as well. Again, resources for your club. You'll be able to get members. You'll be able to buy, or you'll be able to provide tickets for your events, set up raffles, set up crowdfundings. There's going to be a lot of resources that are going to be available to you when the website is finally ready to roll out, sooner than later, hopefully. So stand by. So with that being said, I asked in the Discord if anyone had any dates that they would like me to mention for upcoming events, and I did receive a reply from Kyle, who is one of the admins for the Maryland Foam Alliance, as well as an associate with the zombie intelligence team. So beware. But when asked, I got a whole list. So thank you so much for this list. March 8th, we're looking at Sunny, New Paltz Invitational. March 14th through 15th, Grove City College is having their invitational. Super excited for that. They always put on a great production. March 14th, Colorado University Boulder's lock-in event. March 21st through the 22nd is Geneva's College Invitational. March 28th through the 29th is Bobcat Blasters Invitational at Ohio University. April 4th through 5th is the PTC Invitational at Grove City. April 5th is RPI Invitational. I believe that's up in Rochester. April 11th and 12th, Rochester Institute Technology Invitational. There it is. Always a great time with their HVZ club. Highly recommend checking it out. April 19th is Sunny Binghamton's Invitational. April 25th through 27th is Boiler Dome at Purdue, which is currently tentative, but that's what they currently have marked. I do believe they have a Discord, so if you need more information, check that out. Then, of course, May 9th through 11th, we have Maryland Mayhem. I don't think I need to give too much information regarding that just at the moment. You guys know about that. May 30th is May 30th through June 1st is Survival Fest, once known as Pennsylvania Survival Fest, but this time it will be in Ohio University in Athens. So super excited for that. And July 26th. Also Survival Fest, I believe, just officially announced, and their Discord is up, so join their Discord. July 26th is Midsummer at Binghamton. That's always a fun time, I hear. August 9th is Glass at South Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Shout out to the Wisconsin players. And I believe there was one more that North Shore and Bain were doing. April, someone please get in the chat and let me know what that date is. It's in a different chat, but I know Bain and North Shore are doing their event at their compound that they rented out up in Massachusetts. So that should be a lot of fun. I think it's April 21st, I want to say, but I'm hoping I should get out to that. So, but that is it for the events. Yeah, if you need more information, just go ahead and review the stream and get the name. And again, I think a lot of the stuff is online or is in the Discord. And I'm sure we all know each other, so just hit up someone. I'm sure they'll be able to point you in the right direction, at least somewhere, or hit up the World Film Alliance Discord, and we'll get you to where you need to be. So, with that being said, I think that is it for our event announcements. Is there an online calendar? That is a great question. I think Faddle, one of our admins, is actually working on that, so we'll make sure we'll get that. I did request a post to be made with those dates out to be made on socials. We're getting help from Spadoni, Spud on that, so hopefully we'll get that out to you guys as soon as possible, one way or the other. But yes, there will be a calendar date post for you guys available shortly, so stand by. Let me see. Yeah, I think that's it. So a lot of really cool and fun events happening this year. I'm definitely hoping I get to make it out to more than a couple of these. So let's see which Discord. We'll throw it up in the we'll throw it in the World Film Alliance Discord as well as the socials. Cool, excellent. All right. Well, thank you. Again, if you guys have not done so already, please give us a thumbs up, like, subscribe, all that jazz. But without further ado, I would like to bring out our guest for the evening. Now, our guest is someone who I've had the pleasure of lurking online and following their comments since I've joined in the hobby on Facebook and Discord. I think this community member really kind of embodies kind of what we all enjoy about the hobby, their passion for foam flinging, but bringing a positive approach. And, you know, they're always, from what I've seen, always willing to help and provide good information and advice for people that are looking for information without judging and gatekeeping. And I've seen that consistently throughout the time I've been watching them. So I'm super excited to have them on this evening. I'm sure some of you already know our guest, but they are the club admin for Bucket, which is one of the clubs located in the Northwest Territory, which we'll be discussing. And again, just a very fantastic, positive person that we have in the community that I'm super excited to have on this evening's show. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest for the evening, Dorian Coltman. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Like I said, you know, I always enjoy getting a chance to talk to people that I feel essentially have a good vibe and positive vibe about them. And I think that's you, you know, so thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for the kind words.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go
ahead.
Oh, I wasn't trying to talk over you, but I was going to say it's what you were talking about, non-judgment and explaining things. I think what a lot of people who've been around for a while and who've been really engrossed in hobby culture tend to forget is just how difficult it is to get into the hobby side of Nerf, because this information is not out there. It's not readily available. You can't just Google, you know, what is a speed seal? That's not going to show up on Google. Or if you Google, you know, how do I fix my Fury X? It's not firing. You're not going to find that on Google. You have to go to another hobbyist, someone in this hobby, and ask them politely. and they have to explain it to you, and that's how you learn, and that's how you grow, and that's how you really get into this hobby.
Absolutely. For people that may not be familiar with yourself, why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us, your name, where you're from, and what you do, and just kind of give us a little introduction about yourself.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm located out here in Oregon, and I've been in the hobby for a very, very long time. I think the first organized Nerf war I went to would have been back in 2007. Not a hobby war, this was a casual war, but I started our current club, Bucket, back in 2012, so it's going on 13 years of club organizing now. And if you don't know what the NIC was, or I guess still is to some extent, is the hobby used to have multiple levels of play, where there was the stock level, where you use stock ammo and modified stock blasters, and then there used to be the NIC, or the Nerf Internet Community, where you ran things like this, homemade blasters, hitting much harder, usually with no sort of FPS limit. Whatever you could build, you could run. That was kind of the fun of the NIC. There was no limits on your imagination, and I've really enjoyed that style of play, and I've tried to keep it alive, even though it's become a lot less prevalent nowadays as people from the NIC have retired over the years, and you've gotten so many new options for, super stock and ultra stock and all these new categories we didn't used to have. It's, one of the big pluses of this hobby, I think, compared to a lot of projectile tagging sports, is just how many different ways there are to Nerf. You can be a modder or a painter, you can do integrations and 3D printing and machining, as well as all different kinds of play. And the style of play I really like is NIC play. So we've kept that going here in the Pacific Northwest at Bucket, which is an acronym for Backwoods Uncapped Tagging. So whatever you can build, so long as it's safe and you're firing safe ammo, you can come run it here at Bucket. There's no limits.
That sounds like a lot of fun, and we'll go into Bucket and kind of the NIC style of play a little bit along later during the show. What would you say is your first memory with foam flinging or Nerf? What got you into the hobby? What are your earliest memories?
Oh, I think the first time I really noticed Nerf and really got interested in it is I remember for his birthday, one of my friends got the Nerf long shot when it first came out. And that was a total transformation of what Nerf could be back then, because it was clip-fed and it looked all tactical with the fake scope and everything. It was just much more imaginative and much more... It had a very different aspect to it from the blasters that came out before it. And I remember being the first clip-fed blaster, the long shot was not terribly reliable. And the day he got it at his party, he managed to jam it quite badly. And his father took a screwdriver and opened up the blaster to clear the jam. And that was the first time I saw the insides of a Nerf blaster. And that was when I really started to have some interest in Nerf and realized, wow, these are such cool mechanical toys,
And then what were you doing? Like, at what point did you actually start playing, would you say?
I think the first time I was invited to a Nerf war was as a kid. I had a friend who hosted a big Nerf war in 2007. I remember because the Vulcan had just come out, and he was the only person in Nerf one, and everyone thought that was the coolest blaster at the time.
It still is cool.
It was back in 2007. But I got into the hobby side of things just because of a random YouTube recommendation. Sometime early in 2012, I got a Bobo Lolo modding video.
Hey, shout out to Bobo.
I still remember that video because, again, it completely changed my idea of what Nerf could be. Because I'd grown up with Nerf in stock form, just as, the unmodified toy as Hasbro intended. And seeing this whole new world of homemades and modified blasters and things like that got me super interested. And I started up a Nerf club in high school that year. And that's Bucket. That's the club I'm still running, so...
Very cool. And we'll go into the history of Bucket and kind of the details and logistics of running a high-powered, no FPS cap kind of a club, which sounds like a lot of fun. And I'm kind of curious, are there any other clubs that kind of do that? I know I know that some of the guys out in Detroit play with a no FPS cap, and the guys Tang they host an event once a year, NIC rules.
Yeah. I know there's a club in California that's, I don't know if they call themselves an NIC club, that's no cap. There's one in Utah that's probably one of the bigger NIC clubs in the U.S. And there are a lot of smaller NIC clubs, but these are usually more like a friend group, a group of people who know each other less than a public club. Those are kind of scattered all over the place.
Right.
There's higher cap and no cap clubs in Australia and Singapore and Taiwan and all over the world, but here in the U.S., NIC play is definitely a lot less popular than it used to be.
Huh, interesting. Curious if anyone in the live chat is from the NIC club days, and if so, which ones? And tell us what you were running and what drain blasters you remember using. So, what was your first Nerf blaster, or what was some of your first early Nerf blasters that you remember using and starting to mod? And yeah, let's start there.
Oh, let's see. I think my first Nerf blaster was actually not Nerf. It was made by Busby. It was one of those Bionicle ball blasters, foam ball blasters, back in their early aughts, mid-aughts. And I think the first blaster that I really got because I was interested in blasters, though, was actually the Mag Strike, the Dart Tag Mag Strike. Super fun blaster. Even today, it's very fun, although you don't miss the days of having to pump 40 to 50 times to get full auto in Nerf, because this was before flywheelers or even AEBs or anything like that. Yeah, and I got into modding when I found the hobby in 2012, and so my first mod was actually the Strong Arm that summer when it came out. So I didn't mod until the Elite era, although I've gone back and modded all sorts of end strike stuff. But
nice. And what was the Strong Arm mod? Strong Arm mod that you did?
I did a rear loading mod where I deleted the dart post and chamfered the backs of the cylinder. And then it broke, and I tried to fix the catch, and I failed. So my first mod did not last long.
Story of most of our lives, I believe.
Yeah.
So, what is it about foam flinging Nerf in general? Would you say, again, you've been in this since 2006, 2012. What would you say has, why do you love it? What has kept you in the hobby? And, why do you love it so much?
I'd say there's two parts to it. One, I love the creativity. You never run out of ideas and new things to make in Nerf, because I've been around a long time. There are people who've been in the hobby even longer than me, because this hobby goes all the way back to the 90s. And people are still coming up with new things. That's something I love about this hobby. There's still new technology, new mods, new ideas. It's sort of a never-ending arms race almost to come up with, more efficient and cheaper and more comfortable blaster designs and things like that.
Right.
The other side is just Nerf blasters are super fun to shoot. Whether you're plinking in your apartment or you're going out to, a local park war, or if you're doing what we do at the NIC, where, you're tagging people 150, 200 feet away with a foam dart, that's just immensely satisfying. It never gets old. It really doesn't.
Yeah, it's again, it comes down to essentially adults playing with kids' toys and embracing that youth, which is, I think, I don't know what the stigma is at some point, or maybe the distraction of life and family and work and everything. Sometimes you forget, they just had a scientific study that came out saying that having hobbies related to your youth is actually beneficial for your health. So, and I believe that. And again, it's the saying is, you guys keep me young. And I think truly, again, playing with toys, whether it be, Nerf or Legos or Beyblade, Pokemon, whatever, it definitely does keep you young. And again, I think another answer I get a lot is the community, the community, especially, our community. I feel like being super inclusive. It's a small niche community. Everyone kind of knows each other, but the support there for everyone. And again, we'll go into this, and again, kind of why I have you on here. You can go into any other kind of Facebook group chat, and you can see the difference just alone from the posts that are being made and the replies and the comments that are made. I think the community has a big big deal to do with kind of why, again, I enjoy it.
That's a huge part of why I love Nerf. There are so many hobbies out there that I honestly really enjoy doing the hobby, but I hate interacting with people online because there's so much toxicity and, there's gatekeeping and all these frustrating things that just make it a chore to deal with other people online. In person, they might be great, but like Nerf has such a healthy online community, I think. I mean, every community has its problems. We're not perfect, but a lot of people have put in a lot of work moderating, and even just non-moderators just providing, advice, telling someone, that wasn't nice. You shouldn't be that critical. Let's not dogpile here. You see people always just stepping in, whether or not it's their job or not, and trying to keep the conversations friendly and civil and helpful. And I think that is a huge part of why I've stuck with Nerf for so long.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree. I think, who's that? Michael Matterhacker. Oh, do we have Matterhackers? Michael from Matterhackers is in the house, which is exciting. Thank you for subscribing, by the way, if you are watching. What, let's see. You're from Oregon, and we know that the Northwestern Territory is no stranger to having an abundance of clubs that are out there. What are the clubs that are out there? You guys are spoiled, I feel like.
Oh, we are so spoiled for clubs here. Yeah, the biggest club attendance-wise is probably Borst, which is a public park game. There's smaller public park games all over the Pacific Northwest, but Borst is the big one. We have Waffle, which is our competitive game. I think they do a lot of pickup competitive. I've not been to Waffle, but a lot of players at our club have been there, and they've had good things to say.
And Silver Fox is running that one, right?
I think so. I'm honestly not sure. I'm sorry if you're listening. I don't know much about Waffle, but and then the club I actually recently went to the first time is Mr. Mind has a club up in Everett that do these mall battles where it's there must have been 60, 70 people showing up, about half of them in the hobby and half of them not in the hobby, which is great because that's how people get into the hobby. They go to a game, they experience Nerf, they might show up with a stock. A lot of people there were running stock X-Shot blasters. That's something that surprised me. As someone who hasn't been to a stock game in a long time, how popular X-Shot has gotten. And they might see people running around with, Pew Pews and Nexus Pros and things like that, and then get interested and can I build that? How can I modify and buy and print and, experience new levels of hobby play? That's a great way to get people into the hobby. It's so accessible. And the moderators there were fantastic. It was a very well run game.
Yeah, I've seen clips on online, I think, from Flux and Coney Dog on their channel where I think they've made it up to a couple of the events at the mall, and it looks like a fantastic time, good turnout. And again, I think being able to have an opportunity where you get hobbyists, but also kind of new players that, or it's their first time exposed to the hobby in that way is a fantastic way to continue to grow the sport and the hobby. So I'm hoping to get out there at some point. I know I keep saying that, but at some point it's going to happen. But let's talk about, since you've been in the hobby for so long, what would you say? What are some of the big changes and evolutions that you say you've observed?
Everything. I've been here to see the hobby move to kit modding, because originally, if you wanted to modify a stock blaster, you had to go to a hardware store. You had to go there with, back then we were using Steffens, and figure out which PVC pipe made good barrels for the darts you were using. And you'd have to find random springs that, you had no idea what the spring load was, and try and see if you could make them fit. And then this whole community of companies, early companies being like Explorer and Orange Mod Works and things like that. Here's a blaster by Explorer, by the way. They retired from the hobby now, but they were one of the first companies to make dedicated hobby products. Like, this is a unique blaster in and of itself, but it's also a Nerf long shot. It has one of their internal kits they made originally for the long shot, and they made this custom shell for it. I love this blaster. It's so much fun.
That's gorgeous.
But Hank had such pretty blasters. It probably doesn't show up well on camera.
There
This
it
is
goes.
all
There. That's
hydro
so
dipped
cool.
and machined and everything. His stuff is gorgeous. So fortunate.
That is so
to have
cool.
one. But like, then there was the era where you could buy parts from these companies and just install purpose-made parts to improve the performance of your blasters. And at the same time, I wasn't really involved in the homemade side at this time. But people were making homemade blasters out of PVC and things like that that weren't based on a stock blaster at all. Here's the Assault. People might recognize this. This is pretty much the first serial produced sort of 3D printed blaster. This is where 3D printing really started to take off in the hobby. Made by Kane the Mediocre back in 2014. Both of these two blasters are from 2014. And out of the homemade side of the hobby, people started getting 3D printers and started learning how to 3D print parts. So now you didn't just, you didn't repurpose raw materials into a blaster. You could design your own dedicated blaster parts and print them out at home. And sort of out of Explorer, because Explorer made these production blasters, they were if you don't know, Explorer blasters were very expensive and very low volume. Like, I did not pay for this. I got it secondhand, much cheaper. But when this came out, this build, I think I want to say was about $1,500. And they made 50 of them. So, like, that's where production blasters were at back then. But Explorer partnered with this company called Jet to mass produce some of their designs. The Exus 2 and the Sita were both designed by Explorer originally, and Jet changed the designs to be mass producible and injection molded them. And that's where you could finally just go out and buy a pro level blaster, which was huge. There was nothing like that before Jet. And Jet's Sita, which they bought from Explorer originally, they licensed to a company called Game Face as the Game Face Prime. And the Dart Zone, I love Dart Zone's products, but they kind of copied the Sita a little bit with the Pro Mark 1. If you've ever opened up a Mark 1, it's very Sita inspired, I will say. And then from there, it just grew into all these different products. Now you have all these great blasters from Worker and DWQ and all these Phantom Tech and all these new companies coming into the like hobby space and producing ready-made, off-the-shelf production like hobby-level blasters is awesome to see. I never in a million years could have expected that. Going back from like an era where I had to make my own darts because you couldn't buy short darts yet.
Right.
To an era where you could just go to Walmart and they have half a dozen different options for pro-level blasters you can buy and just take to your local war.
Yeah, no, the evolution, especially when I got into it, because it's funny that you said the Sita, because I think a lot of people forgot about the Sita, actually, because, the Mark 1 and 1.1 came out, and then you had the Nexus, and then, at some point, Game Face got the Sita and did that, and gosh, Game Face, I wish we had more.
Yeah. We miss you, Game Face. We miss you, Game Face. The Triumph is a fantastic blaster, and it's a shame they didn't get to develop more.
Yeah, it's funny because my story is, I always forget this when I talk about how I got into it, is I got into it. The Caliburn, I was waiting on a custom build for the Caliburn. I went to my first Nerf war, got smoked, was like, I never want to feel like this ever again. I got to get something that I can compete. Ordered a Caliburn. It was getting made, was getting impatient. Went online, saw the Mark 1 1.1 has just released, but it was out of stock. So I ordered it on back order, got impatient. And then I found out about the Sita existed and that you could do, you get a new sled and some internals to get it up a little bit more higher performance. So I ended up getting the Sita, and that actually was my first high performance, a comp blaster that I had. And I always forget that. If you guys had a Sita, or if you guys know anyone that had a Sita, remember the Sita, go ahead and just give us your comments about your memories on the Sita. Long live to the Sita. But yeah, I think the Sita doesn't get as much love and credit for their influence and in the hobby. Again, kind of like you said, after that, Dart Zone came out with their blasters, and here we are a couple of years, 3 years later. Shooting.
The Sita was the Nexus before the Nexus. It was so many people right into the hobby. Not as many as the Nexus, because the Nexus was at Walmart. Anyone could go buy a Nexus. But just by virtue of being something you could buy and not have to build, the CETA got so many people into the hobby when it came out.
It did.
It's wonderful.
Can you still get the CETA anywhere? Is it still available? I may pick up one. I know it was like
company-
30 or $40 on Amazon last time I looked from Game Phase.
The company Jet went out of business, but I believe E-Vike still has some in stock. So really old stock, because that blaster came out in what, I want to say 17? I'm not exactly sure. I think 2016, maybe 17.
Because they had the CETA and then the CETA S as well.
Yeah, I don't think you can buy an original CETA anymore, but the CETA S, which came out in I want to say 19-ish, I'm not exactly sure, is still on
right.
E-Bike. So you can still go out and buy a brand new CETA S if you want one.
Good to know. I may just have to do that, actually, just for the sake of saying I have one. I know I gave mine away at some point. Where I was like, I'm never gonna. I have a next year's, so.
It's funny you say that because I also sold my original CETA, and then a few years ago, I felt bad about it and bought a new one. And so I have a CETA somewhere. It's completely stocked, unlike the one I sold. But just to have one, I still have one.
I think I'm gonna follow your footsteps and do the same thing. Long live the CETA S. So let's talk about Bucket. Let's talk about the history of Bucket. Tell us about Bucket.
Yeah, Bucket's an interesting case because when I started Bucket back in high school, it was what we called a stock class club. So this is before many people had chronographs or even knew what FPS was. A lot of people just measured things in ranges back then. And so clubs didn't tend to have velocity limits. Instead, they had ammo type limits. And I wish I had a Stefan on hand. I don't have one handy. They're in storage. I still have a bunch.
You can describe it, though, for those that don't know what a Stefan is. I hope everyone does, though.
Yeah, for NIC level play, because you couldn't buy short darts, and because the stock full-length darts back then were not even good enough to be worth cutting up, if I'm being honest, you would buy rolls of foam backer rod or caulk saver. Like when you're laying tiles, you put this stuff down so you can not waste as much caulk, I guess. If you're tiling like your bathroom. But we would boil them so that they'd straighten out and cut them to length to be dart bodies. This is awful, but this is what we did back then. You would burn a hole in one end and put in a ball bearing or a fishing weight or some piece of metal. Because you needed weight, and foam backer rod, if you don't know, is incredibly light. And then you'd pour hot glue, or maybe if you're lucky, like a felt tip over it. You'd glue a felt tip on them if they were safety slugs. Thank you for that slug, by the way. Safety slugs hurt a lot less than domes. But you had to make each individual dart yourself. And it was a very tedious, very precise process. I still have, probably 1,000 Stefans. But even though I was messing around with that back then, I didn't actually run a club that allowed Stefans because there was no one else in my high school who was into like Nerf. I found a bunch of nerds who were into other hobbies and said, come to our Nerf wars, we'll play with Nerf blasters. And so we had what was called stock class back then, so there was no FPS limit. You could mod your blaster as well as you wanted, but you had to use stock darts. And stock darts back then were terrible. We were mostly using Streamlines and Elites.
Oof.
Because this was before, Dart Zone or Shot or even Busby had clip system darts. They were all still using fat head darts, like suction cup darts back then. But I ran that all through high school, and I stopped running it when I went away to college. But after a few years in college, I kept thinking back on how much I enjoyed Nerf and how much I wanted to return to it. So I just decided to start up the club again, and this time as an NIC club. So NIC being the higher level of performance, we didn't allow Stefans even then because Stefans are very outdated. They're not the safest darts. Like people used them when they came out or when they were being made because they were the only option. But nowadays with production short darts, you don't want to use Stefans. There's no reason to use them because they're not good darts. They're just better than a full-length dart, really. But we instilled that whole idea of super high performance, build the best blaster you can, come to Bucket, and you can run it. Like here is one blaster I used to run and is now in the loaner bin. So if you come out to Bucket, you can run this thing. This was a custom commission I had made by Saber called Ultima, and now you can actually just buy one of these. Originally, this was like a one-off type deal, prototype type thing. But this guy's hitting 430 FPS. Which, if you've never fired a 430 FPS Nerf blaster, it is very fun, and the darts go very far. like 340 feet far if you're going by maximum range. And so you can tag people out 150, 200, if you're lucky, even 250 feet away, which is super fun. There's so much patience and skill and so much luck involved in lobbing a tiny little foam dart out that far away and hitting another player. So much fun. It's a very different way to Nerf, but I guess what I would say is in some ways it moves Nerf a little bit closer nowadays to like airsoft and paintball and things like that in terms of how far away you can shoot people and get tags. And to some extent the pain factor, although Nerf darts, since we use soft ones, they don't hurt that bad, especially once they get out to farther ranges. But Nerf has its own dynamics at high FPS, because like in those other hobbies you might have a few hundred rounds in a magazine. You can just fully automatic or semi-automatic very quickly at very high velocities. But in Nerf, you have 10, 15, maybe 23 rounds in a magazine. And you have to, usually, most people run manual springers here. You have to cycle every shot, and it makes everything very deliberate. You know, every shot matters. There's a weight to every time you fire a dart at someone that makes the experience, I think, very unique from other shooting sports or other tagging sports. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. What is your club player base comprised of, would you say? Again, you guys are all probably high FPS players.
Yeah, I would say more veteran hobbyists. People who've been in the hobby for a long time and want to experience a higher level of play. A lot of people here also play competitive, or if they're, you know, even if they play stock level, they've been modding for a while and they're looking to get into actually running their higher performance mods, because a lot of people build these great blasters that you can't run anywhere because all the NIC clubs are dead, but it's so easy. It's easier than ever really to build a high FPS blaster. It's just hard to find a place to run them, and so Bucket is a great opportunity to take blasters like that. And we've had people show up from, people have driven up from Southern California and come down from, or they've flown up from Southern California and driven down from Canada. And we've had people come from all over. Someone's going to be coming here, I think, from the Netherlands this summer. Like, people travel to see Bucket because it's such a unique experience to be able to play NIC level nowadays. And I'm hoping as more people come and play and then go back to their own hobby communities, more clubs will follow in our footsteps, because it is a really fun way to Nerf. You know, there's unfortunately a bit more of, there's a slightly higher barrier to entry because you need to be responsible, you need to be safe, and you generally end up spending a bit more money on your builds, even if you're printing something you might want to use. You know, something like Jay's Springer Perilous is a good platform for a high FPS club. Someone runs one of those there, and it's still a 3D printed blaster like a, you know, a Talon Claw or a Rush or something like that, but it's much more overbuilt. It's designed with a much longer draw, and so it costs a bit more in hardware, but you end up with something that can keep up at a much higher level of play.
Sure, but your entry level of cost is still cheaper than airsoft and paintball.
Oh yeah,
arguably.
oh yeah. Unless you're doing what I'm doing and buying silly Full Metal stuff that, you know, you don't really need just because it's fun.
We don't need it, but we want it.
Yeah.
So before I go on, we've gotten a few requests of you doing some pinky primes on some blasters, if you have any.
Oh
so,
boy.
Yeah, just to humor the live chat, they are requesting Dorian to do some pinky primes. So
let's see if I can do this one pinky. This is, I think, this is a Worker Swift 1.8 spring, so I think around 28 kg. I do not know if I'll be able to pinky prime this.
Now, before we go any further, is that the $800 all metal Coltman?
Yeah. This is the new. By the way, the plastic version of this, another blaster I highly recommend for high FPS play. Great blaster. The metal version is just a little bit nicer for a lot more money. That doesn't make sense for everyone. But I've been in the hobby a long time. I wanted to treat myself, so I got one, and I absolutely love this thing. Fantastic.
Wow,
worker.
That is gorgeous. Yeah, I have the JV version of that one. That is gorgeous. But yeah, I haven't really gotten a chance to actually play or plink much with it, but I've seen it on the field, and it seems to be like a lot of people are having fun with that one. And there we go, Pinky Prime number 2. Ooh,
There we go. No, I
Nice.
cannot quite pinky prime the Kunlun at almost 30 kg. But here I can do.
The 1.6 is
This
probably
is a.
pretty doable, though.
Oh yeah, for sure. I can definitely. I think most people, or I shouldn't say most people, but a lot of people can probably pinky prime the 1.6 if they
Yeah.
really put some effort into it. This guy is the heaviest spring I have, and it is 40 kilograms. So let's see if I can. Two fingers. I don't hurt myself.
Uh,
Yeah, there we go. That is a huge spring. If you haven't ever seen the spring I had made for this thing, it is like bigger than K14. It's almost twice as powerful as K14.
nice. We'll talk about saber blasters because I feel like that's your weapon of choice. I have a good friend as well that is a very adamant saber user who maybe we'll get on. And I did talk to Conrad at some point, so I'm hoping to
Yeah, that'd be
have him
neat.
on as a guest at some point too. So fingers crossed. So what are some of the logistics of running a club, a high FPS club? And again, you guys, I think something that is unique, or maybe not unique, but you guys play. You guys don't use cover. You use natural cover in the woods, and talk about the logistics of running a high FPS club in the woods and things that are involved with that.
Oh yeah. Okay, so there's two different components to that. One, if you're running a high FPS club anywhere, safety is top priority always in any sort of outdoor sport, but you especially need to be careful. I think the big thing, because a dart is not going to injure someone as long as it's a safe dart at high velocity. If it hits them on bare skin anywhere, the risk is your eyes, right? Eye protection is very important. You want to make sure everyone in your field is using real impact rated eye protection. That's the first thing. I always check people's eye pro when they're new to the club. And we have a huge loaner bin with like a dozen sets of different sizes and shapes of impact rated eye pro. So no one shows up to bucket and doesn't have good eye pro. That's very important. And then as far as woodland play, you almost need to be even more responsible because you're out in the woods. You need to make sure everyone's on the same page. No one's going to get lost. No one's going to fall and get hurt in the woods. Or if they do, you have first aid kit and a plan for. Luckily, we've never had a serious injury at bucket, I'll say, after a very long time of running a club like that. But that's always a risk when you're running around in the woods. So that's very important. For bucket, we're fortunate to live in the Pacific Northwest where there's so much public land you can use recreationally. So we just play on Forest Service land and recreational areas. And we actually move locations almost every event. So we'll usually play 5 or 6 locations in a year.
Oh, cool.
And we find places with different terrain, and as the seasons change, you end up playing in the snow or, out in the heat in the summer or in the mud when it's all rainy in the fall and the spring. And we go to places that are, where there's dense underbrush, or there's places where it's more open. You get to try out different types of blasters and builds and things like that. And that adds a lot of variety to Nerf. Woodland Nerf is very fun. And if you live somewhere where you can play in the woods, but you're not interested in high FPS, obviously you can play Woodland Nerf at any FPS, right? I highly recommend it if you're able to do it safely and responsibly. It's something that I think everyone should try out at least once, because the woods give you so many opportunities to make plays you wouldn't be able to play out in other fields where you're maybe setting up an ambush and you try and lure the other team into a crossfire between, your players on both, your team's divided into 2 teams lying in wait, or you might end up trying to track down the other team because we play in very large play areas. Or you might, end up crawling through the bushes for 30 minutes to get just the perfect position up above the other team and shoot down at them and everything. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Is dressing up in like full ghillie or camo conducive to the play for playing in the woods where you guys play at?
It can help. Generally speaking, bucket as an NIC club, we tend to play less towards the milsim aspect of Nerf. People tend to run actually very low gear. Generally, you just want to wear dark colors, so you can't be spotted super easily. But other than that, people wear, athletic wear and outdoor wear, like, cargo pants and jeans and things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, we the Maryland Nerf Herders, one of our groups. We are fortunate enough to have one wood battle a year that they host out by the venue. There's a wooded area, and I have to say the gameplay dynamic versus our regular our PvP battles that we host is completely different.
Yeah,
And taking account for foliage and trees that affect your shots, even if you are running 250 FPS Springer that you got dialed in. Sometimes it's hard to get your targets, or trying to run a flywheel, or to get through the
yeah.
brush, even though your sights are
That's
locked in.
that's sort of
But
running joke we have here at Bucket is, I think it has been 3 years since the last time someone actually got a tag with a flywheeler here. Because the
I
Springer
believe it.
people run here is so well tuned, they can reach out so far. Doesn't really matter how good your flywheeler is for normal play. It's very difficult to get a tag with one where we play. So people are saying, I'll get the next flywheel tag at Bucket, and then hasn't happened yet in quite a while, so we'll see.
Now, are you seeing AEDs make their way onto the fields at your clubs?
We've had a few show up, just a handful. I don't know if anyone's gotten a tag with one yet, because they've all been ones that were built for like 150 cap public park
Right.
play that was brought just because they thought it was something fun to run at Bucket. No one has built a high FPS AEB for Bucket yet.
Gotcha.
I
was wondering.
A lot of purpose-built high FPS platforms that are Springers. So a lot of like Saber Apexes, M20s, Jay's Perilous. Someone's going to be bringing Onager to the next game, which is Jay's brand new high FPS platform. I'm excited to see one of those in action finally. And then Worker, obviously. The Swift, the Kunlun, and the Harrier are all super popular blasters here.
Cool. Anyone running Seagulls there, getting them up to comp, or are they not quite reaching the same as area?
People run Seagulls generally because we play in the woods. You can match up blasters FPS-wise that normally wouldn't be able to, like, in an open field play against each other. Like, if you have something hitting 250, which is about the lowest end of what you want for where we play, you can try and, close the distance or try and bring them to you in an ambush or something like that and take out players using higher powered builds. Because generally speaking, with Springers, the higher FPS it is, the more unwieldy it is because of the length, and the slower your rate of fire is because of the heavy springs. Such. So if you can get them close to you, you can outgun them with a 250 cap comp build.
And again, oftentimes it's not the blaster, it's the player. So one thing. Well, let's see. Let's see. One thing I wanted to talk about. Well, let's talk about the high FPS blasters before we go on to the next topic. What are some of the high FPS blasters? You mentioned Saber, obviously, but what is it about? What separates high FPS blasters from like Dart Zone versus kind of what you're running, a Saber? And what would you recommend? And what should people that don't really know much about that should be looking for?
It's a tricky question because high FPS can mean different things to so many people, but I'm going to assume 300 plus platforms if you're trying to hit over 300. Because hitting under 300, I think most builds that are popular in the hobby, your Lynxes and Rushes and things like that, and then NPX are great blasters for. But if you want to hit above that, generally you want, in terms of Springer, something with much more draw. Like you can see, Ultima is actually a blaster I commissioned based on their standard blaster, the Genesis, with a much longer draw. That's one of the biggest differences on this. What a longer draw does is it gives your plunger more time to accelerate. So you can have a higher FPS and a lower spring load with a longer draw. You want something that's durable because that plunger is going to be impacting your shell much harder at high FPS than it would in a low FPS build. That's why if you're going to run something printed, you probably want something either heavily altered, like a Caliburn where you've reinforced everything, or something built specifically for high FPS, like Perilous. With injection molded stuff, it's much the same. A lot of injection molded builds can break just as easily at super high FPS. That's why I generally recommend Worker. Worker tends to have very solid internals. They're a great entry point for high FPS. And then if you want something really top of the line, there's machined blasters. Machine blasters, generally speaking, if they're well made, they're not going to break. It would
Yeah.
be, you would have to deliberately try to break a machine blaster in order to have it fail you. That's one of the big advantages, and why I love running machine stuff, because I play very rough with my blasters. I am kind of notorious for breaking blasters, and generally speaking, at Bucket, it's a rare occasion where we have a game where no one's blaster explodes. So there's a lot of blaster death when you're playing at high FPS with higher spring loads, and you got the adrenaline pumping, you got people priming really hard and such.
Right. I think one of the criticisms I hear about some of the machine blasters is obviously the price. But when you think about it, for what you're getting and the reliability and durability, and then adding on top of, it's essentially a platform, and you can still customize it to what you want. It's really not that much, and can cover a lot of your bases. And is something maybe more people should start considering, even though it is a little bit pricier.
I think machine blasters, especially at the price point they're at right now, really aren't for everyone. I don't think everyone would get the benefits you'd expect out of a machine blaster. I think you need, one, financially, you need to be very invested in Nerf, because you're going to be
Right.
dropping a lot of money. This has to be a hobby that you have the means and you're willing to invest a lot of money in, which Nerf doesn't have to be that, obviously. Two, you need like a venue and other people to play against where you're going to benefit from that higher level of durability, right? And there's usually a penalty involved in that in terms of weight. Most machine blasters are heavier. Like, not all of them. Like, this guy made by Hang is actually incredibly light. Like, this doesn't weigh much more than a stock long shot, despite how thick you can see that shell is. Because this is made from all sorts of nylons and Delrin and all these lightweight materials, versus something like this, which is just solid block of aluminum.
I can feel the weight just by looking at it.
Yeah. But yeah, machine stuff is also just part of why you buy it is not practical. It's the emotional response. Machine blasters tend to feel very solid. They're very smooth to operate, generally speaking. There's no flex. There's a lot less friction in the materials and things like that. They just feel a lot nicer. But if you don't absolutely need the level of durability, and if you're not willing to spend that much money on the feel of a blast like that, I don't think they're the best choice for most people, honestly.
What would you say for people that would be interested in looking into some high FPS machine blaster? What are some ones that they should take a look at that you think or that you would recommend?
Certainly, I
And
think
why?
budget-wise, I think Apex is the most affordable, high FPS capable blaster, and that's a blaster I had a little help in the getting that blaster made. That's something I was trying to bug CS about for a long time, was a more affordable sheet metal platform, and he designed that blaster. I didn't design Apex, but I was something I bugged him about until he made it, and it's much more accessible. I think if you buy them from Singapore, they're under $400 right now. They're like $380 or something like that in kit form. Don't quote me on that price, but they are much more obtainable. But you end up with a blaster that's a bit more crude. It's a bit harder to assemble because it's just a simpler blaster. That's how they got the price down, right? Is they made it a less refined design. If you have money to spend, something like Genesis or Ultima is probably, objectively speaking, the best high FPS Springer platform. Just because the way these blasters are designed, they're actually fairly light. You can see there's not much there to it. If you ignore the barrel, this is actually smaller than an NPX, which is crazy for something hitting this hard. And they have a very, very smooth prime. I don't know if you can see that. They use linear bearings like an Apex or a Perilous or a few other 3D printed designs have nowadays, which makes the prime smoother. But honestly, my recommendation right now, if you're looking for a high FPS machined blaster to run at games, I honestly think the Kunlun might be the best option right now. I think this blaster is actually quite a bit lighter than a lot of platforms like Sabres. It's quite, to me at least, it's very ergonomic. This is a very comfortable blaster. And at $800, it's quite expensive, but it is cheaper than a Genesis or an Ultima, sorry. And I think you kind of get more out of it. This is a newer platform. I should qualify it that way too. This came out some years after Saber's. I'm sure Saber will have some answer to it eventually, but this is an excellent blaster. Honestly, if you have the money and the interest, highly recommend it. I'm very happy with mine. It's replacing Ultima for me. Ultima, if you don't know, is this guy I've been running for years because this was my custom personal blaster for many years, and it is being retired for the Kunlun because I think the Kunlun is, in some ways, a better platform, honestly.
Well, and if you can't afford the 800 one, just get the get the other one.
Kunlun, if you have $200 lying around and you want to play high FPS, such an amazing entry point. I recommend that to everyone who has a high FPS club and can afford it. That is an excellent, excellent entryway.
Very good. Wizard Build is asking what optic is on, I think, on the Kunlun.
Let me see. I have a lot of optics. I think this is a Bushnell Elite LPVO. The optic itself isn't super important. What matters is the optic mount. See here, I have a crossbow mount with a few, like I think 300 MOA of adjustment. This is incredibly important if you're playing at high FPS because you need to arc your shots so much in Nerf that if your scope is mounted level, you'll be aiming above people and they'll leave your field of view. And you can't see the people you're trying to hit far away. So this was much more expensive than the scope, and it's much more important than the scope. But a good angled optic mount is what I recommend if you're going to be playing at high FPS. And you can 3D print some. I know there's a few designs out there. And there's a few different machined ones for different applications. But I recommend, honestly, the best ones I found are crossbow mounts because those tend to have more angles of adjustment than rifle angle scope mounts. Because with crossbows, people tend to, I guess, to be using more holdover than with rifles.
Very cool. Al the Geek should take a look at that angled mount. I think that would be a cool thing for his blasters that he does. He's using those scopes as well, so or the sights. So one thing I did want to talk about is kind of again. I know you from your comments on online, Facebook and Discord, and kind of your positive approach to kind of helping people navigate and traverse the hobby community space online with questions, whether it just be, about specific blasters or opinions on, how you would do certain things. Again, you're one of the people I feel that aren't afraid to provide helpful information, and sometimes people aren't always agreeing or ready to hear what you have to say, but you are still able to diplomatically, be able to reply and present a case, and I think that is a skill and a trait that is not necessarily innate and easy to go by, but that's definitely something I wanted to discuss and talk about is kind of how helpful I feel like you've been online and your overall approach to the way you interact with the community.
Well, I certainly hope so. I know for me at least, because I joined the hobby at a very different time when it wasn't as accessible and the community was very different. I wish I had gotten that sort of help when I was getting into Nerf. My first mods were terrible because you couldn't ask someone for help back then. If you were on Nerf Haven and you asked someone for help, you were liable to catch a permanent ban. And that was the most popular online, hobby space back then. The hobby was very gatekeepy. It was very elitist at the time. A lot of people prided themselves on their skills as modders and didn't want to share in an accessible way that information. People in some ways were great about write-ups and things like that other advanced modders could follow. People would make, detailed instructions and mod guides and things like that were very helpful to people who are initiated with the hobby. But it was very difficult to get into the hobby back then. That's probably part of why the hobby was so small in those days. So I think it's huge just to I know it's emotional labor and all that. It can be frustrating, but if you can help someone, every once in a while, just go out and help someone who's new to the hobby, because that's how the hobby grows. And people don't stay new to the hobby forever. If this is a good hobby for them and they stick with it, who knows, in a few years, they might be, your peer. They might be on the same level at modding and playing and conversing with you, and you might have the same sort of discussion you'd have with an experienced hobbyist. With this person, you helped get into the hobby, right? That's how people go from point A to point B. And I think it's counterproductive to get frustrated or to deliberately be unhelpful to people who are new to the hobby, because the hobby requires new blood. That's how it stays afloat. Trust me, I've been around long enough to see so many generations of nerfers come and go. And that's natural. Most people don't stay with the hobby forever, right? You want to propagate your hobby. You want to, introduce new people to it. And that's how hobbies not only continue to like survive, but it's how they grow and they become more fun and more accessible. And you have more places to play, more things to buy, the more people who are in the hobby.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll see online someone will just have a simple question about a blaster, but there's something about the way that you are able to present the information without sounding like you know it all and that your way is the right way. Uh, w- you know, how how can people do something similar to that may not be able, that are afraid to give an opinion or provide some help because they're afraid someone else is going to come in and be like, you don't know what you're talking about, and the
Yeah,
toxic the
I think
toxic trait that we're kind of talking about.
I think it's important to know the difference between your opinion and fact. It's important to understand that even as far as we've come in the hobby, technology wise and product development wise, there's still so many things we just don't understand on a scientific level. Like, no one can give you the math on how to make the optimal rifling device for your blaster, or what the exact, port restriction you need for the best airflow in your pusher and things like that. We're all just finding the stuff out experimentally. We all have our own competing theories. I think it's important to just remember to, humble yourself. Even if you're a good
Yeah.
modder and the builds you make work very well, they're probably not perfect. Modding is not a solved problem. Designing is not a solved problem in this hobby. It's important to understand if you're good at something, try to explain that and help other people get good at it, but try not to have an elitist attitude. Try not to think, I figured it out, why can't they? Right? That's not productive. And chances are you probably haven't figured it out, because nothing really is solved in Nerf. It's all an open-ended problem, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you just nailed it right there. Is really, I think it's you embrace your humbleness, and I can clearly see throughout this interview that is kind of your aura and kind of your shtick. You're very humble, and I think that's a great approach when interacting online, is just to remember to be humble. There are different levels of knowledge and experience, and people coming from different backgrounds. Some people may not even own a blaster for all we know. Having that approach of being humble, but still at the same time providing your knowledge and experience, that's something that should be commended. And again, that's kind of why I wanted to have you on the stream this evening. So well done, sir. Um, so we're getting to that time, ladies and gentlemen. I want to ask you, where do you see yourself? Where do you see the hobby? Where do you see Bucket in the near and distant future?
Well, as long as I'm in good health, I plan to keep running Bucket indefinitely. Honestly, for me, Nerf is a lifelong hobby. I've loved seeing how Nerf has grown and changed, and I want to see where it's going. Honestly, I want to stick around as long as I can. So I plan to always be hosting Bucket. If you're ever planning on visiting Oregon, just let me know. Bucket, I should say, is 18 plus. You have to be an adult, because we are running around in the woods. I don't want to lose someone's kid out there. But as an adult, if you're interested, if you're a responsible, safe player, let me know. We have loaner equipment. You don't need to bring anything. We have high FPS blasters, darts, tactical gear, goggles. Bring whatever you want or don't, and come play with us. Just let me know. As for myself, I think something that's really changed, at least for me, is I've gotten a lot less out of the collecting side of Nerf. I used to collect a lot of vintage blasters and things like that. And to me, Nerf is less about the blasters and more about the people and the gameplay. The longer I've been in the hobby and the more I've grown with Nerf, I think I'm realizing that's the most important part of Nerf, and that, to me at least, because the hobby can mean anything to anyone, really. But I think making new connections, maybe collaborating with creators and clubs and things like that is probably what I want to do in the future. I'm looking to finally get some bucket patches made, and I'll probably commission a local hobby artist to make those, and hopefully maybe do some. I think eventually I'd like to do a big bucket event, a big summer event at some point, a reoccurring one. That's not something we've ever done. But like Apocalypse and Armageddon and all these other big NIC events that are still around. It'd be fun to have one in the Pacific Northwest here, I think.
Very cool. And can anyone, where can people expect to find you besides Bucket? Are you planning to make any of these events that we listed or anything like that?
You can find me occasionally at other Pacific Northwest events. I do occasionally show up to other clubs just to hang out and meet people and try new ways of nerfing, or in a lot of times return to ways I haven't nerfed in a long time. But online, I'm pretty much just on Facebook and Discord. I don't have my own website or anything like that. There's no official bucket resource unless the what was that website with all the clubs called?
World Foam Alliance. No, I'm just joking.
I think it was the World Foam Alliance. I think someone tried that a few years ago.
It's probably Dart Sweeps, Dart Sweep IO. Yeah, Brendan Diaz. Shout out to the real Dart Sweep. Brendan
there
Diaz.
is a bucket page on Dart Sweep IO with a link to our Discord and everything like that if people are interested.
Excellent. Well, again, I want to thank you for joining us this evening. Really enjoyed having you as a guest. Again, if you guys are interested in contacting Dorian regarding Bucket or just chatting, you can find him on our WFA Discord and on Facebook, and we'll get you guys connected. Again, thank you guys, the audience, for joining us this evening. I'll be back in a couple weeks with our next guest. I forget who we have lined up, but I'll let you know as soon as possible. Next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, will be the next episode of Get Off My Lawn with Al the Geek and Captain Xavier. So be sure to tune in for that. Again, please give us a thumbs up, like, subscribe, register yourself on the website when it's back up. Otherwise, thank you guys for joining us. Appreciate you. And don't forget to Dart Sweep. Have a good one, guys.